I am announcing this government will make a new free-of-charge digital ID mandatory for the right to work by the end of this Parliament. Let me spell that out. You will not be able to work in the United Kingdom if you do not have digital ID.
Start here in the UK on an issue that's divided the country over the last few decades. Every adult will need a new government-issued digital ID.
Including Australia, where digital ID is used to access private services.
Downing Street believes that a mandatory ID card system will help stop illegal immigrants working.
Following the plans to be announced by the Prime Minister on Friday, the move is part of efforts to crack down on illegal working.
On November 1st, there was a protest near the train station in Edinburgh at the Scott Monument. And the protest was against the ever-growing problem of digital ID. So with over 3 million signatures completely ignored about digital ID, it subsequently led to the protest I went to and led to this interview with a very kind man that goes by the name of Chris McDougall, and was very kind to give up his time for an interview about hosting protests similar to situations like these and about his history. First question I have for today: how did you get started with the protests and organising it?
So that's a good question. So I began when there was vaccine passports. So that's now about 4 years ago. So when Nicola Sturgeon announced vaccine passports, what I'd done was I started a page called Scotland Against Vaccine Passports. And I think it was just me and a friend that was an admin. So the page grew quite quickly, and then at the time people could post on the page. So people started posting protests that were happening. And I went to one in Glasgow and really enjoyed it, and met loads of interesting people. And for a long time, I sort of just advertised what was happening at the time. Other people were putting things on. It wasn't until much later I sort of got involved with organising some of them. We started in Kirkcaldy, is where we had our first one. And for the size of the town, it went really well. So I've done quite a few since, but that was really quite a fun one.
What year did you start?
So I started going to attending protests in 2021, at the end of 2021, and they started getting bigger and bigger. And then it wasn't till the spring of 2022, it was actually roughly when vaccine passports was finishing. So we made a celebration out of it. So we made it into more of a celebration than a protest as such, but it was a really good day. So that was March 2022.
So you were right in the midst of it when it was all happening.
Oh yeah, big time. But it's one of these things that everything that's happened today is just a consequence of something that happened before. So before I was involved, people were going to lockdown protests and things like that. So there was people that went a long time before me, and every protest, obviously there is someone that advertises and puts it together, so to speak, but it's never it's always like a massive collaboration, if you like, because the way social media is, especially now, it's really difficult to get information out, especially if you had sort of bans on Facebook. So I think these protests, if they go well, it's because sort of a movement helped put it together.
I wanted to hear your personal thoughts on it as well, even online when it comes to privacy.
So yeah, I think what social media does is unfortunately quite clever. So they used to ban pages, but then they realised they could shadow ban them. So to shadow ban something, people don't necessarily see that it's closed down, but they'll see less of it. So topics that they want to push or don't mind if are pushed, they'll allow to gain popularity, but causes that don't want to be pushed, they can shine less spotlight on it. So it's a clever way of pretending that they're not controlling the conversation, but they can really control the conversation, if that makes sense.
Anything else to add, or is that...
Well, a lot of people think, well, it's if you own Facebook, it's up to you, but it's not really as simple as that, because obviously they are registered as a company, as a platform, not a publisher. So because of that, if some crazy person talks about doing something crazy to a politician or just doing something crazy in general, that means Facebook will get away with any involvement in it because they are listed as a platform. So they're exempt from any slander and libel, because if a user does something, it's not Facebook's fault. But then if Facebook then start to deliberately take away spotlight or put on spotlight certain issues, e.g. direct people towards a certain way of thinking, then they're not a platform anymore, they're a publisher. So on one hand, they're getting protection from government for things like libel and slander, which probably happens every day. But they also get the protection of pretending that they're a platform when really they're a publisher.
Do you think that's damaging to how the online space is used?
It is damaging. At the same time, we have to keep up with them. So you see new pages springing up. Like there's a new page UK against digital ID. So that's clever because that page didn't exist before, so it can't have the same shadow bans that we do. So it's unfortunate they get away with that, but we have to recognise ways around it. So there's always a way around things. But it is damaging, of course. I think we get led in certain directions by not just media, but social media.
So what's your plans for the future? What other protests you plan on hosting or going to, say?
So we've got one, we had the November 1st one that you were at. It was really great. We've seen some older faces there, as in people that used to be involved in the lockdown protest, and we've seen some people I'd never seen before. So we've got January the 24th in Glasgow. So hopefully with more time, more groups involved, more time to promote it, it's going to build and build, and it's going to become difficult to ignore.
Is that all you have for the future at the moment, is the protests in January?
Yeah, so me and my friend sort of talked about the dates, and we didn't want to put too many dates on in case somebody else wanted to do something, because you find in these movements it's not as simple as just what you do, but there's other people that want to push things. So other people want to push things, we'll be behind them. But it seems like a lot of people's getting behind January, because I think people recognise, because of the things we've talked about, the way social media is, that groups like ours need time to build big demonstrations. And unfortunately, digital ID, is dangerous as it could be, it's a topic that gets people emotional, which is good for us because it means there's pushback against it.
With everything that's going on the internet right now, it's really hard to get your word out there. So making this video today, how do you feel like, do you feel it will help people understand what's going on?
I think so, yeah. I think we've got I think podcasts are becoming a massive thing. It's almost replacing the news, because as the news is getting less and less trusted, you're going to find a source that pushes you one way or the other. So you might as well just, a lot of people are just sort of happy with sort of interview style format to get their news. I don't think there's necessarily anything wrong with it. I think you're going to drift towards a direction that sort of the way you think is going to bring you to people to your page, and if they like your interviews, they're going to like things you say. So I don't think it's necessarily one of the bad things about the internet.
Okay, how did you organise the November 1st one with all the people you got round to talk about digital ID?
That's a good question. So it was one of these ones. So we've had events that we've planned for months, And then you turn up on the day and then it's so windy that there's buses cancelled and a musician doesn't show up and things like that. Like, you could be really planned and organised sometimes and it doesn't go well, but then there's some days that you plan really quickly, because obviously the Labour's announcement was quite sudden. So we felt we had to put something on reasonably soon. So we only had about 4 weeks of advertising it and maybe about 3 weeks of putting it together. So there was speakers that have spoke for us in the past who are always quite reliable. So we contacted them. A couple of people offered to speak, and we did have a musician that cancelled. It was something happened on the day, and a musician that was ill, but my fiance is a singer, so she sang on the day as well, so I think that helped. I think the speakers were really good. Some of them were planned, some weren't planned, but I think even the ones that weren't scheduled but really added to the day. I think they had a good mixture of sort of solution-based speeches and speeches that were really driving home the message about the consequences of digital ID. So it was a good mixture of speeches. And I've actually heard a lot of good feedback about some of the speakers. I was sort of in between the speakers because, like I say, we didn't really have a plan, so to speak. It was just a bit muddled together, so I spoke more than usual. But I think the speakers that were there on the day were brilliant, and we also had signs given to us by Together Declaration. They're a big group, and that was helpful. People brought their own signs. A group called Anti-Geoengineering helped me bring signs along, so the signs were brilliant, and it was right beside Princess Street. So we had to move last minute as well because the Mound had the Christmas market. So that was a bit of a disaster, but it worked out okay, and I think the spot was good because everybody could see us. And Glasgow Outreach brought their signs, and it was right by the roadside, so they've got all the signs for Toot Against Digital ID, so it's getting support from passers-by basically. So I think that fit in really well with the location, so a lot of it was quite lucky, to be honest. I think each speaker brought something really different, and I think it worked out quite well, even without that much planning, to be honest.
Sorry, I was muted. Yeah, when I was there, I found the speeches really inspiring, like proper research and everything, because I thought it'd be just like a lot of passionate people just speaking out against what they don't like, which is also perfectly acceptable. But I was very surprised to see how educated they were into the subject, and that was really intriguing and inspiring to me.
That's brilliant. That's really brilliant. So we had David Scott, he was at UK Column, so he's really top class. He sort of presented news channels, essentially, that kind of sided with our ideas, so he was really keen. So he came down, he was near the beginning, and they were all really good. My friend Katie, who I've worked with since the very beginning, he went near the end, and he was quite inspiring to me as well, because he just sort of thanked everyone that had came. And people forget that people have got trains, buses, they've cancelled their plans to make it. So her whole point was, well done for doing something.
That's very nice of her.
And I've listened to speeches obviously for years, because I've been to events, had events, seen videos of events, and I've never just seen a whole speech dedicated to thanking everyone that was there. So it was really an interesting take, and hopefully she's up for doing it again in Glasgow, and the January 24th one.
It sounds really cool that you've got a community around you, and everyone's so passionate to come to these protests. That actually leads me perfectly into my next question. Like, what is your drive for these? Is it just the community, or is it the cause of it as well?
Oh, that's a good question, because when Nicola Sturgeon announced vaccine passports, that was my initial drive into it, and I thought, like many people, as I got into it, many people that's fought lockdowns, vaccine passports, some of the net zero stuff even, a lot of the people from our sort of movement have said for a while that it was always going to come down to digital ID. That everything they'd done till now was basically just a tester to see if they could implement digital ID. So I've done this for a lot of years now, and obviously at one point we'll need to pass on to other people in the group what we do. But I just thought when digital ID was announced that we couldn't really sit it out, because what was the point in fighting vaccine passports? What was the point in people before me that fought lockdowns? If we were fighting for freedom then, we can't walk away from it now. It'd almost make it all in vain. So my motivation's partly that, and partly I'm like a new dad. So I just don't want my kids to grow up in the sort of a country that I don't recognise.
Yeah, that's a completely fair point, because even at my age, that I'm thinking about the future of my career, and that involves online editing and online jobs, and having that compromised because of the UK is very disturbing. What is your take on that? Is there enough people doing protests against stuff like this?
I'm not saying people like to take the easy option, but so when I first went to protests, I met a girl called Ashley who was really instrumental in a lot of good stuff. Probably about my age. She kind of hung back, but she was quite knowledgeable, and she really helped the movement in a lot of ways. And I actually used to interview people like yourself, as in I used to do interviews. I used to just go on Facebook Live and interview people. But she was not too much for being on the camera, so I was just chatting to her, but it was almost like an interview. And I said to her, do you think these protests are doing anything? And she said, well, it's not that you can see them doing anything, but you don't actually see what happened if they never happened. Meaning that there's no way of actually telling in any given country how far the situation could get worse if it wasn't for protests. So it does sound, I think the thing about protesting is, who wants to do something who wants to push back their whole life? It doesn't sound like a fun way to live. You don't want to spend your whole life defending, pushing back. But I'm maybe just optimistic that I think I like to call them rallies, not protests, but I think if we rally against this stuff now, I think we might defeat these ideas for like the next generation. I think they might fatigue if we can get past our fatigue. So when there was lockdowns, like before my time, there was thousands in the street. When I was involved in vaccine passports, we got thousands in the street. If we can get all them people to get past the fatigue of it, then I think we can really protect something. I think it's a fatiguing thought to think you're fighting for something to stay the way it is. But I think we have to. I think there's no other choice.
As you were saying, if the protest didn't exist, what would the future look like? So, like, say if nothing happens with our rallies, what do you think our future would look like in just 10 years' time?
So my defence of rallies is that it might encourage people that other people are fighting the same cause. So it might, somebody might just see it and they might speak up. So it might not just be the rally itself, but it might just be other people seeing that other people are fighting for that. Not disbelieve that, because I think if you had no rallies on a subject, people would just say, well, nobody cares about it. If nobody is willing to stand in the street with the sign and walk down the street, why should anybody else speak against the government?
How do you get it out publicly? Like, how would you get it out publicly if you're just doing local things? Do you want people to do more interviews like this with you, or interviews more in general about stuff like this to get it more out there into the general public?
Yeah, I think that would be brilliant. We're all just people that have like jobs and other things going on in our lives, but stuff like this is brilliant because it's just like a trickle effect, isn't it? Some person might see it and then they might want to get involved. Like I say, podcasts seem to be the sort of the way things are going, so I think the more of this, the better.
Okay, is there any additional stuff you would like to add?
It's been really good questions. It's quite good to think about what we're doing and somebody asking why we're doing it. It's good. Really, just if you're watching this and thinking about doing anything, just think, would you rather look back in 10 years' time and say, well, should have done something? Do you know what I mean? Whether you think rallies are the answer or writing to your MP or making a petition, that might not be, we've all got the same solutions, but it's just doing something, even if it's one day every couple of months, even if it's writing one petition that takes you half an hour. Do you know what I mean? Even if it's doing local activism, you've seen a lot of local stuff pop up. So I don't think digital ID will get through. I think we'll be strong enough to stop it. I really do. But we have to take it. You know, we can't just be complacent.
New Prime Minister that said that we're going to have to hand in digital ID for being able to work. Like, how do you think people will just stop working altogether?
See, this is the thing. This is why the pushback now I think is important, because I think most people know it's not popular. But what we need is enough people to know that enough other people are willing to say no. That's the real battle. I think we all know it's not popular. Like, I don't really know anybody that wants it. So the battle is making sure enough people know others will say no. Because there's one thing it being popular, but are people willing to say no? Because you don't want people to be sitting in fear.
Yeah, absolutely, because it's very easy to be afraid of the government.
I think that the way to look at this one is, if we cross this line, there's going to be no other line that people will stand up to. It's not just the direct consequence, it's the moral implications, really. I think this is the line that we have to say no. And that's why it's such a big deal.
Yeah, that definitely 100%. We need to push back against the government, because I feel like we have been a bit too compliant, especially since lockdown.
Single lockdown, so my parents, well, I don't want to tell you their views on sort of interview, but they had mixed views. So they thought lockdowns had to happen because they were worried, but then they didn't believe in vaccine passports. So they're kind of mixture. But when it comes to this, they're like, this is ridiculous. So that's given me a lot of encouragement.
I've been hearing from a lot of people around me as well, saying that the digital ID stuff is the final line in the sand that people are not willing to cross. And so this is the final. So do you think 2026 will, in 2026, are you hoping that this year will be the last year we will ever have to protest against something so ridiculous? Hopefully.
Now, there's a question. I think in my personal life, I need to sort of focus on other things, but there's young folk like yourself. Obviously, I'm not old, but there's folk coming through the movement now, younger faces, fresher faces. Maybe some old faces will come back on board. So if you're talking about me personally, I'll support what's happening without being as involved, I think. But the question itself, I think what will happen, my prediction is, I think if we and when we beat digital ID, I think the government pushing their narrative will start to fatigue a little bit. And when I say the government, I really mean the sort of globalist agenda. I think they'll start to fatigue slightly, but they won't stop. They'll move to maybe climate, they'll move to something else. They won't stop. So I think you might see the movement go in different directions, but I think there's always something to fight for. So that's a good question, and you've kind of stumped me.
That's fine, I do that.
I think yes and no. What is it Ronald Reagan said, that freedom's only one generation from being extinct.
Yeah, I've heard that quote before.
So, and this is why, like, resistance movements often fatigue, is because who wants to be fighting something their whole life? But it's unfortunately the world we live in. Like, I'm sure my granddad didn't really want to go and fight in Europe when he was like 16, but he did. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's a sacrifice to your time and effort, but find the fun in it.
Yeah.
So I'm sure other topics will come up and things will move on, but I think if we win this one, we're in the driver's seat. And when I say we, I mean like the international, because they're pushing this obviously in Vietnam, other European countries. But the way the internet is now, a lot of countries are feeling closer together. So I think if we can stop this in Britain, maybe.
So if, like, obviously, it's the digital ID is not winning as we've been saying, which is a very good thing. But if it went to a global scale, what would that say about our people as a human race?
Another interesting question. Each country's got its own sort of feelings about it. I think America will shut it down quickly. Because I think the First Amendment, whether you're left wing, right wing, or in the centre, the First Amendment, the only reference point to freedom of speech internationally. And really, the whole digital ID conversation is actually about freedom of speech. I think most of the time you talk about digital ID, you could actually cut and paste the word digital ID for freedom of speech, because it's really the capacity that any government would have to suppress freedom of speech. So if you took a place like Britain where they're already doing that, it would be like that on steroids. Because America, for whatever you think of it, it values freedom of speech, and it always has since its conception. So I think it'll never get through in America, because I think people will instantly correlate it with freedom of speech in the First Amendment.
Good point. I don't think I have anything else to add there, so that's great. I think that, is there anything else personally you'd like to add, or can we end the interview here?
Well, just hopefully see you all on January the 24th, and keep doing what you're doing, because it's the new way we're going to win this. Do you know what I mean?
Since the interview, not much has changed about digital ID when it comes to the UK, as it's still planned to be put in practice in 2029, but because of all the protests all across the country, including the one that was talked about today, digital ID is being legislated in the government, so means that it's going under evaluation because of the public pressure and defiance against it. The people's voice is strong, and we must not forget that. We fight for our freedom.